Hello everyone, this is the Pennsylvania and Florida Eastern back again with another review. This time we got Walthers Mainline back, and I'm glad I got Walthers Mainline again. I would hope to get more Walthers in the future, especially Pennsylvania stuff, especially if it's locomotives and rolling stock, although there's not really like a wide variety of Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of locomotives as they used to do like Generation 1 and early Generation 2 diesels. Anywho, today I got two locomotives. This is a set of ALCO PA and PB. Got a PB right here. Both are DCC and sound. This was a set that Train World had. They have one left. The rest, I believe, are DC, but they're DCC ready, I believe. If not, you can always, it's not that hard to put a new board in and whatever you want in them. I've done decoder installs myself and decoder swaps, so these are pretty good stuff, and they're pretty easy stuff to work with, especially with diesels. But the problem with diesels is that they don't have a lot of space in them compared to steam engines. Steam engines usually have the motor drive inside the locomotive, and they don't have to share a decoder in there. For diesels, I'm going to turn this around. They have a motor inside and a decoder on top of it. And the problem with diesels, decoder setups with the motor, their decoders can heat up faster because of the motor being right under the decoder. And the heat from the motor could sometimes screw with the decoder eventually if you run for very long periods of time. Especially at my train club where we do commercial operations for events that happen around the premises of the property, especially around the fair where it's like a 3-week long event and it's like 15 days. Well, not really 3 weeks, but like two and a half weeks. It's about 15, 16 days that a lot of trains usually have to operate from like 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. We're trying to really stop the whole old way of running things where people would just run trains, especially with DCC decoders, for around 12 hours at a time. And we're trying to reduce the sound decoder locomotives to around 4 to 6 hours. And non-sound decoder locomotives can run up to 8 hours. 8 hours going probably speed step 50 or 50% speed of the locomotive is, you might not think it's much, but when you're operating on a layout that is slowly transitioning from an old design to a new, more modern design, it's a proving ground for. It's really a proving ground for how well, I guess, a company's models are made. And the ones that make it the most are why I love Walthers. These are definitely commercial grade models that you can just run, especially with their drive gear. However, recently I've heard about the 4-axle locomotives from Walthers, especially in the Mainline, not doing really well with the gear towers. Something wrong with the bearings in the gear towers with the worm gear seem to have a bit of an issue. Hopefully Walthers can fix that. It's just something that a lot of companies come across. Now, granted, they don't make models. Even though I praise Walthers, Mainline, and Proto, they're not intentionally for my club to just run for hours non-stop. That's not their purpose. Most of the time, us modelers just run trains, for an hour or two at various speeds, and not always the same locomotive. So, when you have a collection, most of the time your engines are in boxes or in cupboards or trays, just sitting there, most of the time. At the layout during the fair, if people want to run stuff, it has to be test proven. And Walthers is one of the great ones. Mostly we run modern diesel at my club. They don't really mind if we run older stuff like Gen 1 diesels, usually F units, sometimes E's. And the camera train that we have at our club is basically one of these. It's one of these PA units. It has no motor. It's gutted out so they can have a sound decoder in here, which is you might think, well, why do that? Well, the B units are the ones that are powered, and they just have regular decoders. So you might be so I'm going to get into the reason why I find the that usual locomotives that are run at the fair don't have sound in them, and we'll get into that once we talk about the decoders that come from the factory on these models. Some people are like, well, what's wrong with them? It's a complicated story. Not that too complicated, but there's some electronics stuff that goes along that makes them not the greatest. But they're perfect for home running and all that stuff. Alright, so I'll see you in the next section, and we'll have these bad boys out of the boxes. Alrighty, so now that I have them out of the box, we can take a good look at these. Before I get into the details that come with them, I found this little baggie here. These have some interesting pieces right here. And for those who don't know, these pieces go onto the front of the ALCO PA cab unit. Right here. So these would cover up the coupler in the front. And you would take the coupler out and then either glue this in or it probably snaps in. So they have two variants. They have the one that is just a flat piece of metal that curves. And then they have the curved one. And the curved one will probably make more sense for the Pennsylvania prototype. So I thought that was neat that they added these. I didn't think they would add more details that you can put onto these. But yeah, these are pretty cool. I might use them at some point. I don't plan to really double head a ALCO PA unit, so well, since we got the cab unit out, as far as I understand, it doesn't look like there's details inside the cab. It looks like there's just I could see a gear tower in there. But if we get this to focus, there we go. Truck detail seems pretty nice. It's a 6-axle locomotive. These usually the 6-axle Walthers locomotives are pretty reliable. Their drives are pretty good. The reason why I say that and have proof of that is because we use these at the club for fair usage. Some of these have been used for many, many years. Some of them have Athearn drives, but these models, they'll last many years if you run them on commercial layouts. And I'd be surprised if commercial layouts that do operations like museums and whatnot don't use these, because these are pretty solid engines. It has a headlight. I don't think the number boards light up. I don't see any see-through black plastic. Got the horn detail. Now, Pennsylvania had the train phone. These are Mainline. You can always install more details to them if you want. Fortunately, these don't have any, but that's okay. I could always get a brass kit if I want, or maybe an already painted Tuscan red kit for this, or maybe there's a plastic kit, and then if I have a plastic kit, I can use plastic cement to have it fused with the roof of this locomotive, but I'd probably rather go with a brass kit. It's got finer details that won't break as easily. And then you got the side grill, which it's not see-through, but on the camera it looks like there is detail behind there, which is really cool. It's just molded plastic, but it's really nice. You got some porthole detail right there. There's some clear plastic inset in there. Now, when you handle a Walthers ALCO, you should be really careful. And not all locomotives you have to be super, super careful how handling it, but I try to hold it like this. That's usually the usual way to hold a diesel locomotive, and HO is to hold it between the gas tank or the fuel tank and the top of the locomotive. Because the shell on these are kind of finicky and kind of loose. I'll show an example with the B unit, and we'll take that one off as an example. But if I wanted to open this, it just pops off really easily. Now I can't really pop off the A unit without unscrewing this coupler right here. Luckily, the A unit and B unit are not that very different at all, really. It's just that the A unit just has a wire that makes the headlight turn on. There's no backup light on the A unit, but it has a really nice sprung diaphragm, which is really cool, especially for a Walthers mainline model. That is really cool, and it tilts and all that stuff. But yeah, there's no reverse light on these, and I'm not sure if the real ones had a reverse light. On top there is a, I can't tell if this is brass, but it might be a brass grill for the fan. You can't see all the way in there because it's just a plastic mold on the bottom. But that was pretty cool that they added fan detail on the top. And there's a steam generator outlet right there at the end of the locomotive. Now the B unit, I had to be more careful because this one is a little bit more likely to have the shell pop off. What's interesting is that this is the forward position of the B unit, or I like to call them battery units. And this is how they would couple together. And usually the steam generator is in the back of the locomotive, but in this case they have ALCOs for their B units. They had it in front, and you would get confused if this was the rear of the locomotive, but technically this is the rear. Usually you can tell by the grills between the A and B units and the fan for the generators to convert the diesel torque power into electrical power for the traction motors on these engines. So I'm going to take the B's shell off, which is extremely simple. Just do a slight spread and there you go. Now here's a look at the worm drive. Looks pretty good. It's got some lube in there. Get some, looks like dust, but that's okay. Walthers is known for their helical gear drives, and I heard these are pretty ultra silent, and I have to agree. It's got a nice sort of die-cast frame. I don't know what it looks like under the paint, but it's all painted, the die-cast frame. There's a nice speaker right here. And now we got this decoder. This is an economy decoder. Now, from what I understand from a fellow modeler who is the president of my club, who's had many years of experience working with models and many different types of decoders, the problem with the economy decoders, especially working in fair operation conditions, is that the amplifier, that's a little chip that's somewhere on here, will blow out, and they're not really the best in terms of long-term running. And usually after that we just splice the speaker from the board so that it won't stop the rest of the decoder from fully functioning. So that does happen. It has happened many times at the club. It's just a thing where you're going to get when it comes to an economy. Again, it's just unfortunate how it is. It's a fine decoder if you're going to run it at home, which I usually run from time to time. I really like these locomotives. There's nothing wrong with them. I don't run them as much, but I try to cycle through all my trains at least once and then cycle through them again and run them. And the problem with the B unit compared to the A unit is that this one, the B unit seems to need to keep alive in order to keep going compared to the A unit. And the A unit just keeps going and going and going. It doesn't want to stop. So when the A unit goes over some dirty track, it has no issue. But when the B unit goes over some dirty track, you can tell that the A unit's having a little bit of struggling and the B unit stops and it's not playing sounds as much. So at some point, I'm going to decide to take out the economy decoders and put in some proper decoders, maybe from TCS, or what I'm probably going to more likely use is the ESU sound decoders. I'm not going to replace the speakers. The speakers are fine. I have spare speakers just in case, and I'm always probably going to buy more. They're cheap. They're $2 to like $2.50 a piece. You could probably get them for cheaper too. They're on Amazon. They're like they're 2 amp speakers, 1 watt, 2 amp speakers, 28 millimeters, I think. They're amazing. They're good speakers, and it's great that there's enough space and there's a housing for the speaker in case you need to remove it, and it goes directly down since it's just a hole, pretty much where the gear thing is. So there is sound escape for the locomotive already. So already this is a really nice design. But if we look at the decoder closely and you see that chrome, reflection below the decoder, if we can get the focus, that's the motor. So the motor is exposed to the locomotive. Well, not exposed to the locomotive, but it's exposed and really close to the decoder. So that generates a lot of heat, and there is not a lot of heat escape for this to rise through. I mean, unless I cut a hole, maybe for the if I cut a hole from the exhaust stack right here, or if I wanted to, I can maybe cut a hole right there, even though that it'll just enough so that there can be some flow around the fan. But again, you can only do so much with model trains. There's not a lot of space inside of here. I'm not sure exactly how much space there would be once they put this back on, but I'm pretty sure it's right around, not that much higher than, it looks like capacitors right there. I don't know what exactly these are. They look like capacitors. But, yeah, economies are not really the best in terms of long term. I mean, they're fine once that, I mean, the sounds are okay. They're fine. They sound like ALCOs. But once that amplifier goes out, you pretty much have to either splice the wires for the speaker and have it run as a DCC silent locomotive, or a mule, as our club terms DCC only models. So eventually your locomotives will become mules. I don't know how long for home operation, but on a commercial layout, at some point they will become mules, which is fine. You don't always have to have sound. I prefer sound because I like more atmosphere for the models and whatnot, and I believe sound really adds a layer of realism and creativity for the model train hobby. So yeah, that's the decoder. Again, you can always replace. It's super simple. They got these things you can pull out the contact wires in the speaker and whatnot. And that's pretty much it. And the power wires that go from the motor to the board. Really simple sound decoder. It's cheap, and it's not really the greatest. But fun fact: a lot of mainline models, not just the proto models, are actually switching to ESU lock sound, which is interesting. I'm actually interested to see how well those hold up. It's a little bit difficult to go on. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to get this out of the screen. But yeah, I hear that ESU lock is being used a lot more. Seems to be everyone is going a little bit away from soundtracks. Even the proto line's going away from soundtracks, which is quite interesting in my opinion. I'm surprised that Walthers is doing that. But hey, I guess they got a better deal or contract deal with ESU. Man, this is getting a little bit silly. There we go. Now it's back in. But yeah. Here's the bottom. Standard truck, same thing as the cab unit. That's what's easy about the B unit, is that it can easily come off and then couple together. It's got a pretty close gap. It's not against each other, diaphragms, but it looks good. Again, you can do so much detail work on these PA units. They're great. I love these. It's strange that the diaphragms can actually come off. But yeah, you can get these for a really good value. I think the A, B sets you can get for $200 for DC, and you can add whatever you want after that. If you like to install your own DCC stuff. I got the Sound because it was a pretty good value that they had for the final one. But these are economies. I don't know when they're going to do Pennsylvania ESU. I think if you check on Train World, they probably have a pre-order thing going on for these, for the ESU ones. And they're pretty much going to be around, I think, 320 something or close to 400. Still, that's a lot of money. I got these for like $250. So I think I saved a lot of money for something that's used. Well, not really used, but it's brand new. Hasn't been opened, and it was on sale because they're getting rid of the soundtracks, Walthers stuff. So this is probably like a couple of years old. That was sitting on the shelf for a long time, and it was the last one that they found in their warehouse. And I'm like, what? It's the last one. I'll get it. I want to get some ALCO PA units at some point. Yeah, and these shells can be finicky, and that's why you got to be careful. I know it sounds weird. Doesn't seem like it's stiff, but you can't just go like that. You have to reach under and grab it like this. Otherwise, the shell can come off if you're not careful, and your chassis will just fall to the ground. And depending on the type of metal they use, it could either bend out of shape, and you'll have to cold work it somehow back at the normal shape, or it could shatter and splinter, and you do not want that to happen. So, yeah, we'll go into the running session. These are fun to drive. Hopefully, when I run these, they will not have any issues. But what I mean by that is that the B unit just has those issues of just cutting out sometimes, and it's not a complete problem, really. It's just there. It just happens. All right. I hope you guys enjoy the running session. I'll see you later, and we'll talk about my final thoughts after the running session. Okay, and that was the running session. I found some odd things going on while I was running the models. For some reason, the B unit's rear chuck was derailing. Although I checked the gauge and I have had no issues with the gauge. The gauge is pretty much right on point. It's not too narrow, those drive wheels. And usually Walthers is rather, engage a lot of the times, if not most of the time. And they seem to have a really good track record with their quality. So I can't seem to figure out why it was derailing. So I'll have to probably bring it to my local club and see what my club president has to say, and we'll have to run some tests on them. But yeah, as you saw during the running session, the B unit seemed to be losing power somehow. And I'm guessing the capacitor on that decoder is just not enough to keep it going. And I do clean my tracks and I do clean my locomotive's wheels. And these locomotive's wheels were pretty much clean. And I have tried to break them in, usually going forwards on my layout. So maybe I'll have to do some reverse braking in to see what happens. But yeah, you might be thinking, well, man, these are junk. They're really not junk. It's just that there's a problem with the decoder. And the thing with these economies is just that, they're great for home usage. And, I know it doesn't seem right that they're not really running well. The A unit does really fine, but the B unit just needs a better, capacitor in it. So probably at some point I'll look inside the A unit and see what's going on, and probably compare it with the B unit and see what could be solved with what I find. If not, at some point again, I'm just gonna swap out the decoders and put something better in them with Keep Alive, obviously. There's not too much space inside there, but if I can find a flat enough capacitor pack, I can probably fit them in the rear of the locomotive where the speaker is. And again, these are fine models. They're really great, entry-level people who want to get into like transition era railroading, or if they want to do, first generation diesels with steam. These are great models. I haven't really heard a lot of bad things about these models, the PAs from Walthers Mainline. It's a shame they don't do a Proto series, but I don't think you would have to really get a Proto series. I mean, Rapido's making pretty much the Proto series for Walthers, even though they're not really connected at all. I would not buy Rapido. I believe they're overpriced in my opinion. I can just get these and just add more details to them as I go. Although the Rapidos are nice, I prefer the Walthers. They have a longer track record than Rapido, and Walthers just seems to have one of the best drives out there. And these 6-axle units are pretty solid. They're solid runners, and I can't wait to do more with these in the future and add more details. And again, the Walthers mainline stuff is really great to dive into details and really customizing your own locomotive to real-life prototypes. Or if you want, you can just create your own unique locomotive that you want to make with details. You can custom paint them. You can add unique details that maybe a railroad doesn't usually have, or you can just model after a specific prototype that is numbered after it. So, yeah, it really is the best for entry-level modelers. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I would give these locomotives a solid 8 out of 10. The reason why I want to give it any higher is obviously because, the lack of details. And really, most of the details you'd really need to add is maybe some grab irons on the front of the locomotive, and probably some in the rear, and maybe some hoses, and the train phone, of course, for the cab unit of the PA series, especially because it's a Pennsylvania type. Other than that, the decoders are fine. It's just the long term, you're going to have to turn them into mules where they're just quiet. But you can always swap out a decoder if you want. I mean, these are super easy to work on. They're not overly complicated, like 3-axle Proto 2000s sometimes. Some people just don't even want to work on those at all because they can be a pain in the butt. with the wiring system that they came up with. And these locomotives, you can always build upon them. They really don't have any usual issues, like out of gauge issues. And I just find it weird that the B unit's having issues, because I did check to make sure that it was engaged, and I rolled it actually across his layout before, and maybe there's just something back there that I can't see that's probably causing a derailment or something. I don't look at this layout every single day, so maybe something is derailing it or something like that, or maybe sometimes I flex around the oval a bit so it doesn't line up correctly. It might hit something and just derails, but I know it's not the locomotive itself. But you don't ever want to have confirmation bias, so always check your stuff to make sure everything is okay. Alrighty, then that ends the Walthers Mainline ALCO PA/PB set review. I'll see you next time in the next review. You guys have a great day. Bye now.